Morning everybody. Today I'm going to teach you how to stitch your dream panel on your actual printed dream panel. In the sample that I've already made, I just stitched it on white plain fabric. So I'll show you both methods to do on plain fabric and to do it directly onto your panel. First of all, you need to prepare all your fabric. You need to pre-wash your fabrics. Make sure that you use a good quality fabric as well. I'm using 100% cotton in all my examples today, and I'm also using a Lumtex batting, not too thick. The thicker you go, the more difficulty you will have in lining up your panels, so do not use a very thick batting at all. You will get a nice loft even with a thin batting, so just use the batting that you are comfortable with using. After you've washed and ironed your fabric, I even used a little bit of starch spray just to get all the wrinkles out of my fabric and get it nice and flat and even. So you can do that, it's optional, you don't have to if you don't want to. I didn't do it on this white piece of fabric, but I found it a little bit difficult to line up as the fabric was quite soft. So I thought with the next one I'll just starch it a little bit, just to give a little bit more stability to the fabric. I also recommend that you use 505 spray between your layers. So the 505 spray, you will spray onto your batting and then lay your panel or your fabric on top, and make sure that all wrinkles are smoothed out. And you will do the same with your back fabric. So you will see, if you look at my sample here, I'm going to use plain white fabric for my back. So I've got my fabric, I've got my batting, and I've got my front panel, and it's all with 505 spray adhered to one another. And then I just added a row of pins just around the perimeter of my block. On this piece of fabric I'm going to do another plain one, and then I'm going to do my panel, but I'll show you. I actually drew a grit on my fabric so that I can use that to line up and make sure that my fabric lines up with my template and also lines up with the markings on my hoop. Very important to keep your fabric in a certain way, your template in a certain way, and your hoop as well. If you line up all three, you won't have a problem lining up your design at all. On the plain one, you'll see I did do the grit, but I did not do the grit on my actual floral pattern because I already got the outline of the leaves as my guide. So I don't need the grit on this one. Specifically, I'm actually going to draw my grit as I go along on the dream panel. But if you do the plain one where you do not have the leaves as a guide, I suggest that you draw a grit on. Or what you can do as well is take your template and draw the flower petals onto the fabric. To print out your templates, inside the zip file you will find PDF files. You will need Acrobat Reader to open the files. Just print them and make sure that your printer is set to 1:1 scale. So true size. Do not fit to page or shrink it in any way or even landscape it. Print it as it is and you will get the correct size for all your templates. I just printed all my templates and I laminated them as I'm going to use them a few times. I didn't want them to tear. So you can by all means do that as well, and they will last you for a very, very long time. There are 52 panels. If you are doing the 9.5 by 14 inch hoop size, you will do a leaf per hooping. If you are ever doing the smaller hoops, you will need the split files, but you will find that in your files as well. And you will notice that your panels are actually split according to the hoop size that we're going to stitch. So these are the 6x8 hoop size files that I've just split. So where we will hoop only once in the bigger hoops, you will actually need to hoop twice to get to the center panel and so forth. So get your templates printed out, get your fabric ready, everything adhered, and then we are ready to get started. I can just give you a tip. I actually have a scan and cut little vinyl cutter. You can use the Silhouette Cameo or any of your other vinyl cutters as well. And I've just cut out my templates. It was very quick and easy with the scan and cut to actually just cut them out. For that provided a nice dark line around. so that your scan and cut, when you scan it in, will pick up the line and you can simply cut it out using the scan and cut. You choose your fabric, your threads. It really depends on what threads you want to use. I'm using Marathon Ryan thread, and I've selected these colors to use on my panel. I'm going to try and, as far as possible, match the color with the leaf that I'm doing at that moment. It'll go darker and darker to the outside, but it really depends on what you want to do. If you want a high contrast, you can even like a bright yellow color or white you can use on top if you want. By all means, just choose the colors that you like. On this previous one I've done, I've chosen cream brownish colors for my center, and then I went out to a pinkish color. I would suggest, if you want your back to be the same color as your front and look neat as well, because we hoop our back fabric in the same time, do wind some bobbins, and plenty of them as well. You're going to use quite a lot. As you can see, it's a very big project when you finish. So let's get started. Get everything ready, folks, and let's get started stitching. We're first going to start with our center panel. So we're working the quilt from the center outwards. So get your template number 52. And then we're not going to hoop the quilt. We're actually going to float it in the hoop. So you're going to hoop water-soluble baleen. Just a thin layer, doesn't have to be quite sturdy. It's just so we have something to stitch on and something to line up our pieces. So you're going to, first of all, on your baleen, mark your center points, and you will notice on your hoop you've got little markings to show you where the crosshairs should be. So just mark on your baleen, and you can use a water erasable or any fabric pencil to mark out the center of your hoop. And try and be as precise as you can. And there you got your center marked out on your soluble. Now what we need to do is we need to line up the center with the center of your panel with the center of your fabric. On your fabric you can also mark the center point, and at this stage you can line up the center with the center of your hoop, and make sure that you will see I've got this grid lined up, that you've got the center throughout lined up neatly on your hoop. So your first placement is perfectly placed according to your where we're going to stitch. I like to push a pin through the center, and then where the pin comes out I can line it up with the soluble. Just hold that down. And take your time and really make sure that you've got it lined up properly. You can even take more pins, and as you go up, I'll just go according to my grid line there and just make sure that I've got it at the top as well. And once you're satisfied that you've got the placement correctly, that it's nicely lined up, you can use 505 spray and just adhere it to your soluble. So I'm just going to lightly spray solid with 505 spray, and then again just push my pin through, making sure I am lined up, and place my fabric down. And I'm going to do the same with the bottom. And then you can just double check your horizontal line as well, pushing a pin through and making sure that where it comes out it meets the line on that side and on this side, and it's perfect. So as you can see, the grit that I drew on really helps to line up your fabric perfectly with a straight line onto your background. If you, however, if we're doing the panel without the grit, I'll just show you this one. Remember where the name is on your fabric, that will be the bottom of your quilt. So I'm just going to turn that towards myself. And then just for yourself, so you know how the panel will, the template should be, you will see at the bottom you've got three little leaves there. And if you take your template and you can line it up there, don't worry too much about the top. I did not follow all these little curves, I just did my own thing there. But at the bottom you can see how they're supposed to line up. So what you will then do is take your fabric marker and mark out according to these red crosshairs that you see on the template. Mark out your center and your horizontal lines. So this is how you will draw your grit as you go along. And you can then draw across in both directions to get a center line. So there you can see, I'll just push a pin through so you can see exactly where my center is. That is where the center is of my panel. So I've got the center of my panel, I've got it marked out on my fabric, and I've also got it on my hoop. So now it's very easy as well. Same as we did with the grit fabric, make sure you line up your horizontal and you line up your vertical with your hoop, and then you're ready to stitch. I'll just show you when you're doing the smaller hoop designs that you have split files you are working with for a panel. I will supply you with the full panel and also the split file, so you will have to print out both. Not all of them will have both in, because it depends if it's split or not. So some of your panels might be split, some of them you will be able to do in your hoop, depending on what hoop size you are using. So to do that, you'll take your full shape that you've got and you're going to line that up with the center of your panel, and then you're going to place your first half on top of that, making sure that you've got your horizontal and your vertical lined up according to your piece. And then your center for your design is going to be in that area. So you're going to mark your fabric differently. You're going to mark it there and to get your center point there. What you also can do is just push a pin through the center just to see where your center will be, and when you lift up you can actually mark at the bottom. You can make your marking where your center point for your design will be. So you're first going to stitch your top half and then you're going to do your bottom half in the same way. Just to recap, so you will first place your big template that's not going to fit in your hoop on top, making sure that you line it up with your center. Then take your half that will fit in your hoop, place that on the template, on the previous one, so that the outline lines up, and then just mark where your center for your design will be. So the center of your hoop will be there, so because you're only going to stitch the top half. When you're done with that one, then you're going to do the exact same thing. That area will be stitched. You're going to do the same, line it up again, do the bottom half, mark this center this time. You will see it won't be lined up with that area because you're going to line it up your shape to the bottom, and this will be your new center for the bottom, and then you'll stitch the bottom area. So it's actually very easy. Once you've done one, it will start making sense how to line up with the proper. The main thing to remember is just that the center point on your stabilizer, the center point on your fabric, and the center point of the design should all three match where you want to stitch. I'm now going to place my quilt in my machine. You will need to probably, what I would suggest is to just roll up your quilt so that it's a bit more manageable and not as big and bulky to work with. So you can roll it up on both sides and even take some clamps and just clamp it so that it actually stays there and doesn't come push against your arm. I've placed my fabric with my hoop on my machine and I've selected design number 52 to stitch. As you can see, the center line that I have marked on my fabric does not line up with my needle, so I need to move the design for the machine a little bit so that it can line up with the marking that I've made. So I'm going to go into edit mode, move, and I'm going to move the needle up until it meets my center point that I've drawn. I'm just going to make sure from both sides that it's lined up, and you can even drop your needle so you can see if it's placed perfectly. If it needs to move a little bit more, then you can move it. And I'm going to drop my needle again and it's perfectly on spot on. So we're ready now to stitch. I'm going to thread my needle quickly. This first panel I have two colors in, so you'll see the center where the pebbles is one color, and then you can switch to a second color for the second part. I forgot to mention, in your PDF files you will also find this file that you can print. This is an image of the whole quilt and the layout of all of the blocks. And as you can see on my example here, I've actually taken my Sharpies and I've just colored according to what colors, what leaves I want what colors. So you can make a little chart for yourself with your colors that you're going to use, and then just color in or outline your leaves so that you plan ahead on what you want what color. So as you can see, we just stitched number 52, which is our center panel. Now you can go ahead and stitch any of your leaves that surround your center. So we're going to work from our center outwards. Preferably try and work in a circular way so that your fabric is pushed outward in all four directions. So don't continue in this corner and then try and do that corner and then this one, otherwise your end won't meet properly, or chances is that there might be extra fabric or shortage of fabric where the two meet. So we're going to start in a circular fashion, do all the leaves that surrounds 52, then all the next row and then the next row, and so you continue until you have finished all of your blocks. The center just finished, so I'm going to remove my hoop from the machine. Carefully not to tear anything or move it. And then I'm going to lift my quilt, and I'm just going to take my scissors and just cut away where this water-soluble is. So you can just turn your hoop maybe the soluble facing you, and then just trim the soluble close to the stitches all around your shape. After you've done the center panel, that would be design number 52, I've chosen 49 to do as my next one. Like I said, you can do any of the surrounding ones that touch 52 if you want. I decided to just start with 49. So 49 will sit in this region here. But first let's get our hoop ready. So again, you will hoop one layer of water-soluble baleen and take your ruler and mark your center of your hoop. I can just mention I'm using this clutch pencil. It's specifically for fabric marking. You get different colors lead that you can use with it, and it totally washes out in the wash. So, and it's got a nice fine point, so you can actually mark more clearly, and your lines is thinner, so your placement will be much better than with a fat pencil or with your normal marking pencils. After you marked your center, we're ready to line up the center of our design. I'm just going to place that out of the way. And on my quilt, I'm going to place my template that I've printed out onto the stitches. Now, where your black line is where the stitches is on the previous one. So your black line should lie on top of your stitches. Another tip I can also maybe give you is try and use the color next to the next color, or colors that are next to each other. Make sure that they blend in with each other. So if you are slightly off, it actually looks like a shading effect rather than if you used maybe a black and a white together, and it's you can obviously see them if you are out a little bit. So I'm just going to place it where I think it should go, and then I'm going to mark the center. Now I'm using my grit on my fabric that I've drawn, and making sure that if it's at the bottom lined up, then it should be at the top as well. Otherwise I'll just move it over so I know my crosshairs lay perfectly as well. You can even take your ruler and measure from that area, and it should be the same on this area as well, so that you are sure your block is aligned perfectly. And when you're happy with your placement, you can take your pin and push it through the center to mark the center of your design, and also mark the top and the bottom of your new crosshair. Just going to lift this up so I can see where my center is, and I'm going to mark that as well. I'm then taking my ruler and I'm drawing a line where my design should sit. So that is my new center marking. You then take your hoop, and again like we did last time, line up your center that you just marked with the center of your soluble. So I'm pushing the pin through my center, looking for the center on the soluble. sure I've got my fabric up as well. When you're sure you're all correct, you can use 505 spray again to keep it in place. When you load your new design that you want to do, you can just take your template and place it where you had it when you marked out your center lines, and then move your needle over to your center point, and you can drop your needle so that you can see if your placement is perfectly on. And if you're happy that it's in place where your template is, you can remove it and make sure that the center point that you drew on your fabric is on top as well. So then you know it will be, if not perfect, close to perfect where your placement is. I can't stress enough, please take your time when lining up. Make sure that you've got your crosshairs lined up, your X and your Y axis on your stabilizer, and so that your fabric is straight. If you are slightly off to a certain degree, then later on it becomes a problem. So at first you might see you're only off about 3 or 4 millimeters, but when you end up you'll see you're out about 1 centimeter. So that's why it's very important to take your time and make sure your measurement is correctly. If you can, you will notice on the file that it's got 2 steps. The first one is just an outline of the shape, and I've lengthened the stitch length for you so that you can use it as a placement line, but I'm going to use it directly on the fabric, and if I don't like the placement, that at least is easy to tear out or to unpick, and then to adjust my placement accordingly. That's just an extra step just to help you line up. If you are quite confident with multiple hooping, you can actually skip that step if you know your measurement is perfect. But let's stitch that so you can see what it would look like. If you're happy with your outline stitched, you can just go ahead and continue stitching the rest of your design. So you can see I've got my placement and I'm very happy. It's lined up perfectly. Again, like I said previously, in case you are a little bit out, use colors that blend quite well together, so that if there's a transition or there's a little bit of an overlap or a little bit of a gap, it's not as obvious. Remember folks, when you look at a big quilt, you won't see these tiny little mistakes if you are out a millimeter here or there. So don't be too critical, but try and line it up as best as you possibly can. After our second petal is finished, we're ready to remove it again from the hoop and do the next one. Go and turn your hoop wrong way facing you, and then just trim through the soluble. Do not cut your fabric. And you can hoop a new layer of water-soluble baleen for the next petal to be done. I'll just show you quickly what these first two leaves look like. You can see it's quite a good lineup that I've gotten there. And we're now ready to do the next petal, and I'm going to do number 50. My next one, and I'm going to do it in the same color. So my first row all around I'm all going to do in this purple color, and then I'll switch to another shade for the rest. So again, you will take your template, mark your crosshairs, mark your center point, line it up with your markings on your soluble, and then bring up your needle and stitch. I will do this petal with you, and then I'll leave you to do the rest, and I'll come and show you while I'm halfway or so. I'll show again how I continue or how I go along. But once you've done 1, 2, 3 petals, I'm sure you will know the method to do all the rest, as it's exactly the same. You just move around your quilt and you build it out as you go along. But your placement lines, the steps, is exactly the same through all your petals. So let's do the next one quickly. Okay. We're doing number 50. If you look at your paper, I'm doing number 50. We've done number 49. So I'm going to do the adjacent number 50 now, next. So I'm again going to place my template so that the black line of my print is on top of the stitch line that's stitched previously. So I'm going to line it up as good as I can. And when I'm happy with my placement, I'm going to mark my red lines, the ends, to find the center of my design. I'm then going to take my ruler and draw my lines. And because I drew my grit previously, I can see that my grit, the space between the grit and the line is equal. So I know everything is straight and perpendicular like it should be. And there I've got my center point for where my design needs to go. And on my screen I can see my leaf is this way up. So I need to place my design this way up as well. So you can see your number is upright, so that is the way it's going to go into your hoop. So I've hooped my water-soluble baleen, and I've marked the center of my hoop according to the markings that is already on my hoop. This is the way the design will lay, so this is how I need to place my fabric on top. I'm going to push a pin through the center where I marked on my fabric. Take my quilt over and make sure that the pin lines up with the center of my marking that is on my hoop. Just holding that down and just flattening out my fabric. Trying to keep this in place where I had it in the center. And you can even push that down through your soluble to keep it there, and just make sure that this line that goes down matches. Just show you properly this line over here. You can do that by also pushing a pin through. So I'll push a pin through where I know the line should be, and then making it sure that it lines up with this line over here. When you're happy with your placement, you can use some 505 spray, spray this area and stick it in place. And we can take it over to the machine and line up your needle with the center point of your marking. Okay, I think I'm happy with my placement, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch the outline design to see if my placement is spot on or not. Looks good. I'm really happy with that as well. Just see where it meets the other leaf. And it's perfect. And you can continue stitching the rest of the design. There's still some soluble behind these panels, but you can see already how beautiful, and this is the back of the quilt, it's going to look. And if I turn it in the front, you can see we've finished now 3 petals, and I'm very happy with the placement so far. You can see it joined perfectly in that shape. So you can now continue and do the rest of your leaves. I'm just going to continue, otherwise we're not going to do this whole quilt on camera, as it's going to take too long to do. So I'll continue and do a few leaves, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. I'm first going to do my center panel and 2 leaves on my printed dream quilt, so that I can show you what that looks like as well, and then I'll continue with this one. And we'll go along like that and see how it goes. When stitching on your dream panel, again, just make sure that where the print is on the bottom towards you. Then you know your quilt is the right way up. I'm going to take my 52 panel, and I'm going to line it up with my design where I want my picture to stitch, and I'm going to mark the center markings, and then I just drew my lines across to find the center of my panel. So I can now place that onto my hooped water-soluble. I've hooped my soluble and I've marked the center of the soluble as well. So I'm now going to push the hoop underneath. And then use a pin, push it through the center and line it up with the center of my soluble. I'm going to hold that in place and make sure that the line that goes up, it's very faint, I hope you can see it on camera, but the line that I drew up, that it is directly onto the line of this soluble. And to do that, I'm just going to spray some 505 so long, because I'm now going to place it now. You can push a pin through the top, lift it up, and make sure where your pin comes out that it is lined up properly. You can see there's my pin, and I'm lining it up, holding my hand underneath, taking my fabric over, and because I sprayed 505, it will stick in place. I'm going to do the same with the bottom. See where my line goes. Push it through, lift up, make sure that it lines up where I want it. And place it perfectly where it needs to go. I'm doing the same with the sides. Push my pin through, lift, spray, and place. And on this side as well. So this way I know that this crosshair and the one that's drawn onto my stabilizer matches perfectly. If you want to, folks, and you feel the 505 is not going to hold, by all means you can add some pins through if you want to, but so far I haven't had a problem. The 505 seems to hold everything together nicely. And you can load the design onto your machine that you want to stitch. First time we're going to start with the center panel, which is number 52. And I'm going to make sure that my needle is lined up with the center of my design. If it's not, you need to move it a little bit over. And I'm just going to drop my needle so I can see that it's in the perfect place. We're about 8 or 9 leaves in at this stage, and I thought I'd just recap doing another leaf with you, which will be the final leaf I will do with you, and then I will go ahead and complete my quilt. So your very first step is to hoop 1 layer of water-soluble baleen, and then mark out the center of your baleen with a pencil or anything you can clearly see on your water-soluble. We're now going to do the next leaf. If you look at your template, I've finished number 43 just now. I went this way around, so I'm going to do 38 next. This is my panel 38. I'm keeping my hoop as I will insert it in my machine, so my clip on the left side, so keep your hoop upright the whole time so that you can't make a mistake and perhaps place your fabric the wrong way around. Open the design on your machine so you can see the direction the file will lay, and so that you can hoop accordingly. So if you look at your file, this is the way it will lay. So you can see your crosshairs going according. Now it depends on your hoop size that you're using. It might be that your crosshairs lay in a different direction. That's why I say make sure that you have your fabric and everything the correct way up. So I'm going to take my panel at this stage, and it doesn't matter how you lay your panel out now. You will see where it joins the other leaves, and just move your paper template until you're happy with the placement and where it needs to meet. And don't worry too much if you see some of the print that's off. It really doesn't matter. You will see as you go along. If you look at this leaf, for example, you can see the stitching is not quite on the white line there. It really doesn't matter. You will see when the whole panel is done that would actually enhance the design and make it look like the leaf turns over on the edge. So don't strictly go according to the print. The prints might not even be exactly the same. It depends on who printed it last, or how their machines were calibrated. So we really just need to go according to our design at this stage. We try and keep as best we can in the print, of course, but rather just make sure that your stitches align perfectly. So I'm just going to see where my design needs to go, and when I'm happy with my placement, I'm going to take my pencil and again, this is a wash away pencil, so make sure you don't use a permanent marker or something. And I'm just going to mark my crosshairs on my fabric. Okay, then I'm taking my template away and I'm completing my lines across my leaf. And this will be the center of my design. So if I place my template back on, you can see that is where I need to line up my needle when I start stitching. But we need to put our quilt on our stabilizer now. And for this I'm using some pins. I'm pushing a pin through the center of my lines, lifting my quilt up, and then I line my pin and I push it through the stabilizer. Keep my pin straight up, straight down, folding over, and you can see how you need to move your fabric so that it aligns perfectly. When you're happy with where you have your center, just smooth it out a little bit. And I like to just push it through the stabilizer and just keep it in place there. Then I'm going to do the top line first, align that with my bottom. So I'm just going to follow the line, push my pin in, and I'm going to push my pin this time straight through, lifting it up a little bit. And then spraying some 505 spray. And I'm going to use my pin as my guide. You can see my pin lays perfectly on my line that I drew, so I'm just going to put my hand inside and then just smooth out my fabric, gluing it to my stabilizer. I can now remove my pin, and I'm going to do the same with the bottom. So push the pin in, straight through, lift it up, spray 505 spray, and then use the pin to give me direction on where to place. And I'm doing the exact same with the left and the right sides. And you will probably see if you align properly, it should be perfect on your left and right anyway. But if it does not, you can just adjust until you're happy with your placement. The more accurate you place, the more accurate your design will stitch. Now I'm going to remove all my pins. If you feel you need a little bit more to secure, you can always put pins, just make sure it doesn't come in your stitch area. If you want to just double check that you've got everything correctly as you wanted, you can just place your template on the lines that you drew and make sure you are fine. Then you can take it to your machine and line up your center of your needle with the center of your design. It looks like when I've actually opened my design that it is spot on in the center, so I'm just going to double check by just dropping my needle. And by the looks of it, it's fine, it's in the center there. If it's not, you will go into edit mode, go to move, and then just move wherever direction you need so that you are exactly on the crosshair in the center. When you're happy with your placement, the first step that will stitch is just an outline, and it's got quite long stitch length, so that if you are unhappy with your placement, you can unpick, reset where you want to stitch, and then just stitch that again. Move your machine back and stitch again until you're perfectly happy with your placement. So let's